The stagecoach rattled to a halt in a cloud of dust as Grace Reynolds clutched her small leather valise with trembling fingers. After 3 weeks of arduous travel from Boston, she had finally arrived in Ukiah, California, a dusty frontier town nestled in the Golden Hills of Mendocino County. It was 1872, and the promise of a new life awaited her, along with a husband she had never met. Grace smoothed her wrinkled blue traveling dress and adjusted her bonnet, doing her best to appear presentable despite the grime of the journey. Her advertisement response from Adam Blackburn had promised a comfortable home, respectability, and security, all things she desperately needed to outrun her past. "Last stop, Ukiah," the driver called out, already unloading luggage from the top of the coach. Grace stepped down onto California soil for the first time, her boots landing in the dusty Main Street. The town was more substantial than she had expected: a proper general store, a hotel with a restaurant attached, a small church, and various businesses lined the thoroughfare. Men in wide-brimmed hats nodded politely as they passed, while women in calico dresses glanced at her with undisguised curiosity. "Miss Reynolds," a deep voice called from behind her. Grace turned to see a tall man striding toward her. His face was partially shadowed by his cowboy hat, but she could make out a strong jaw covered in several days of stubble and piercing blue eyes that assessed her with immediate interest. His shoulders were broad beneath a faded blue shirt, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. "Mr. Blackburn?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the commotion of the stagecoach depot. He removed his hat, revealing thick auburn hair that caught the afternoon sunlight. "Adam Blackburn," he confirmed with a slight bow of his head. "Welcome to Ukiah." Grace's heart hammered in her chest. In his letters, he had seemed kind and straightforward, but she hadn't expected him to be so handsome. At perhaps 30 years of age, he was older than her 22 years, but not by as much as she had anticipated. "Thank you for meeting me," she managed, offering a small smile. "I wouldn't miss it. Let me take your bags." He reached for her valise and the trunk being unloaded from the coach. As they stood there, an awkward moment passed between them. This man was to be her husband, yet they were perfect strangers. "I thought perhaps you might like to freshen up at the hotel before heading to the ranch," Adam said. "The journey must have been exhausting." Grace nodded gratefully, but before she could respond, a shout rang out from down the street. A man came running toward them, his face red with anger and exertion. "That's her, that's Grace Winters," he shouted, pointing directly at her. "She's wanted back east." Grace's blood turned to ice. Of all the things she had feared might happen, she hadn't expected her past to catch up with her so quickly. The man approaching was unfamiliar, but he clearly knew who she really was. Adam looked at her, confusion clouding his features. "Grace." The man was drawing closer, and several townspeople had stopped to watch the commotion. Grace could feel her new life crumbling before it had even begun. "I can explain," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Before she could say more, Adam stepped in front of her protectively. With a swift movement, he positioned himself between Grace and the approaching stranger. "Sir, I suggest you calm yourself," Adam said, his voice low but carrying authority. "This lady is my fiancée, and you're causing a scene." "She's a thief and worse," the man sputtered. "There's a reward for her capture in Massachusetts. Her name ain't even Reynolds, it's Winters." Grace fought the urge to run. Her legs felt rooted to the ground as her past threatened to destroy everything. Adam turned slightly to look at her, and in that moment their eyes met. Instead of the accusation or disgust she expected, she saw something else: a calm determination and, remarkably, concern for her welfare. "Whatever happened before, it doesn't matter now," he said quietly for her ears alone. He took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "You're safe with me." Those 4 words, simple but powerful, broke something inside Grace. Tears welled in her eyes as Adam turned back to face her accuser. "I don't know what business you have with my fiancé, but any matters should be addressed to me from now on," Adam stated firmly. "If there are legal concerns, we can speak with Sheriff Davis in the morning. For now, I'm taking Miss Reynolds to get settled." The man sputtered, clearly not expecting such resistance. "You don't understand. I understand that you're harassing a lady who's just completed a long journey, Adam interrupted. Whatever your grievance, it can wait until tomorrow. Several onlookers murmured their agreement. In this frontier town, a man's protection of a woman was something to be respected. Fine, the stranger growled. But she won't get away this time. I'll be speaking to your sheriff first thing tomorrow. As the man stalked away, Grace felt her knees weaken. Adam's hand steadied her elbow. Let's get you inside, he said quietly, leading her toward the hotel. Once they were in the small lobby, away from curious eyes, he turned to her. I think we need to talk. Grace nodded, her heart still racing. Yes, I owe you the truth. Adam secured her a room for the night, then led her to the hotel's small restaurant. Once they were seated at a corner table with coffee before them, Grace took a deep breath. My real name is Grace Winters, she began. Everything I told you in my letters about myself, my character, my desires for a family, that was all true. But I didn't tell you why I needed to leave Boston so urgently. Adam's face remained impassive. I'm listening. I worked as a lady's companion to a wealthy widow, Mrs. Eleanor Harrington. She was kind to me and I was devoted to her, but her son Walter was. Grace paused, searching for words. He had unwanted intentions toward me. Adam's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, allowing her to continue. When I rejected his advances, he became angry. One night, Mrs. Harrington's diamond necklace disappeared. Walter claimed he saw me taking it. Grace's hands trembled around her coffee cup. I was innocent, but who would believe a paid companion over the son of the house? There was talk of arrest, so I fled. And the man at the station. I've never seen him before, but he must be a bounty hunter. Walter probably put out a reward. She looked up at Adam, her eyes pleading. I didn't steal anything, Mr. Blackburn, I swear it. Adam studied her face for a long moment. Do you have any proof of your innocence? Grace shook her head miserably. Only my word. To her surprise, Adam reached across the table and covered her hand with his. Then I'll take your word, Miss Winters or Reynolds, if you prefer that name now. Shocked, Grace stared at him. Just like that, you believe me. I've spent my life reading people, especially their eyes. Yours tell me you're scared, but not guilty. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Besides, a thief doesn't usually flee to a place where she's expected and her identity known. That wouldn't be very clever. A small, grateful smile touched her lips. I'm not a thief, but I am a coward. I should have stayed and fought the accusation. Self-preservation isn't cowardice, Adam replied, but we do need to decide what to do about your situation now. Grace felt a flicker of hope. I invited you here as my bride. That offer still stands if you want it. His blue eyes held her steadily. We can be married by Pastor Miller tomorrow morning, which would offer you my name and protection. Then we'll deal with this bounty hunter together. But you barely know me, Grace protested. I know enough, Adam said. I know you're brave enough to cross a continent alone to start a new life. I know you write thoughtful letters with a kind heart. And I know I'm not about to let some Eastern dandy's false accusations ruin what could be a good partnership between us. Grace felt tears threatening again. Why would you do this for me? Because everyone deserves a second chance, Adam said simply. I had mine when I came west. Now you're having yours, he paused. Of course, if you'd prefer to postpone our wedding until this matter is settled, no, Grace said quickly. She drew a steadying breath. If your offer still stands, I would be honored to become your wife, Mr. Blackburn. A smile transformed Adam's serious face. Good, then that's what we'll do. He stood, offering her his arm. For now, you should rest. Tomorrow will be quite a day. As Adam walked her back to her hotel room, Grace felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. She had come to California seeking escape and security. Instead, she had found a man willing to stand beside her against the shadows of her past. Whether it was foolishness or fate, only time would tell. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the California sun warming the wooden boardwalks of Ukiah by the time Grace emerged from the hotel. She had slept fitfully, her dreams plagued by Walter Harrington's sneering face and the bounty hunter's accusations. But with the new day came a sense of determination. Adam waited for her in the hotel lobby, dressed in a clean white shirt and dark vest. His usually tousled hair was neatly combed and he had shaved his stubble. When he saw her, his face brightened. "Good morning," he greeted her. "I brought you something." From behind his back, he produced a small bouquet of wildflowers. "I thought every bride should have flowers." Grace accepted them with genuine pleasure. "They're beautiful, thank you. I've spoken with Pastor Miller. He can marry us at 9 o'clock if that suits you." Adam hesitated. "Unless you've changed your mind." "I haven't," Grace assured him, surprised at her own certainty. "But what about the man from yesterday? I saw him heading toward the sheriff's office earlier. I figure we have about an hour before he causes trouble." Adam offered his arm. "Shall we?" The small white church at the end of the main street was empty except for Pastor Miller, a kindly older man with spectacles perched on his nose, and his wife, who would serve as their witness. The ceremony was brief but proper, with Grace and Adam exchanging simple vows and plain gold bands that Adam had somehow procured on short notice. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Pastor Miller declared. "Mr. Blackburn, you may kiss your bride." Adam looked at Grace questioningly, and she gave a small nod. His kiss was gentle and respectful, a brief meeting of lips that nevertheless sent an unexpected warmth through her. When they parted, Grace found herself blushing. "Mrs. Blackburn," Adam said softly, testing the name. Ready to face the world, before Grace could answer, the church door burst open. The bounty hunter stood there, accompanied by Sheriff Davis, a tall man with a silver mustache and weathered features. "There she is, Sheriff," the bounty hunter exclaimed. "Grace Winters wanted for theft in Massachusetts." Sheriff Davis looked uncomfortable. "Adam, is this true? Is your mail-order bride a fugitive?" "This is my wife, Grace Blackburn," Adam replied calmly, emphasizing her new name. Whatever accusations exist against her previous identity, we're prepared to address them legally and properly. The sheriff sighed. "Mr. Jensen here has papers claiming there's a $500 reward for the capture of one Grace Winters, wanted for the theft of a diamond necklace valued at over $2,000. "May I see those papers?" Adam asked. Jensen reluctantly handed over a folded document. Adam read it carefully, then passed it to Grace. The notice described her accurately but lacked any official seal or signature from a Massachusetts court. "This isn't a legal warrant," Adam pointed out. "It's a private reward notice. Where's the court order for her arrest?" Jensen shifted uncomfortably. "The Harringtons are influential people. They wanted this handled quietly." "I'll bet they did," Adam said dryly. "Sheriff, without a proper warrant from a judge in Massachusetts, delivered through the proper channels to California authorities, you have no legal grounds to detain my wife." Sheriff Davis stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "He's right, Jensen. I can't arrest her on a private reward notice." "That's not how the law works." "But she's a thief," Jensen protested. "I am not," Grace said firmly, finding her voice at last. "Walter Harrington falsely accused me after I rejected his improper advances. His mother would never have believed I would steal from her. We were close friends despite our different stations." "It's your word against theirs," Jensen sneered. "Indeed it is," came a new voice from the church doorway. Everyone turned to see an elegant woman in her 50s standing there, dressed in expensive traveling clothes despite the dust of the journey. Behind her stood a nervous-looking young maid. "Mrs. Harrington," Grace gasped. Eleanor Harrington walked forward with dignity, her shrewd eyes taking in the scene. "I've traveled a very long way to find you, Grace." Adam stepped protectively closer to Grace, but she touched his arm reassuringly. "Mrs. Harrington, I swear to you I never took your necklace," Grace said earnestly. "I know that, my dear," the older woman replied, surprising everyone. "That's why I'm here." Eleanor turned to Sheriff Davis. "Sheriff, I am Eleanor Harrington of Boston. This man," she indicated Jensen, "was hired by my son without my knowledge. I've come to clear this young woman's name and bring my son to justice." Jensen's face reddened. "Now wait just a minute. The necklace was found hidden in my son's desk drawer last week, Mrs. Harrington continued, ignoring him. When confronted, Walter admitted he had hidden it himself and accused Grace to punish her for refusing his attentions. He has since been disinherited and is facing charges in Boston. Grace felt lightheaded with relief. "You came all this way for me, Mrs. Harrington's stern face softened. You were more than an employee to me, Grace. When you disappeared, I was heartbroken. It took some time to discover the truth, but once I did, I had to find you. She glanced at Adam. Though it seems I'm rather late. We were just married, Adam explained, a hint of pride in his voice. So I gathered. Mrs. Harrington studied him with the careful assessment of a protective mother figure. Are you worthy of her, young man? Adam met her gaze steadily. I'm working to be. The answer seemed to satisfy the formidable woman. She turned to Jensen. As for you, your services are no longer required. The reward has been withdrawn. Here are your travel expenses back to Boston. She handed him an envelope. I suggest you depart immediately. Jensen looked from the envelope to Sheriff Davis, who merely shrugged. With a final glare at Grace, the bounty hunter stormed out. Sheriff, I apologize for the disruption, Mrs. Harrington said. I trust this matter is now resolved to your satisfaction. Sheriff Davis tipped his hat. Seems to be, madam. Congratulations on your marriage, Mrs. Blackburn. After he left, an awkward silence fell over the church. Pastor Miller and his wife discreetly excused themselves, leaving Grace facing her former employer with Adam at her side. Mrs. Harrington, I don't know how to thank you, Grace began. You might start by introducing me to your husband, the older woman suggested with a small smile. After proper introductions, Mrs. Harrington insisted on treating them to a celebratory luncheon at the hotel. As they walked there together, Grace felt as if she were floating between her past and future, each represented by the people beside her. Over a surprisingly elegant meal for a frontier establishment, Mrs. Harrington explained how she had tracked Grace across the country, following the trail of mail-order bride agencies until she discovered the match with Adam. I felt responsible for what happened to you, she told Grace. Walter's behavior was inexcusable, and I should have seen it sooner. You couldn't have known, Grace said gently. Perhaps not, but I could have acted more quickly when you disappeared. Mrs. Harrington turned to Adam. You should know that your wife was the most trustworthy, compassionate person in my household. Boston's loss is certainly your gain, Mr. Blackburn. Adam's hand found Grace's under the table. I'm beginning to realize that. By the time lunch concluded, it was clear that Mrs. Harrington intended to return east the following day. You're welcome to stay longer, Grace offered, genuinely sorry to see her go so soon. No, my dear, you have a new life to begin, and I would only be in the way. The older woman patted Grace's hand. But I do hope you'll write to me, and should you ever need anything at all. Thank you, Grace said sincerely, for everything. After Mrs. Harrington retired to her room to rest from her journey, Adam suggested they begin the 5-mile journey to his ranch. Are you ready to see your new home? He asked as they walked toward the livery stable where he had left his wagon. Yes, Grace answered, suddenly realizing how little she knew about her new husband's life. Their correspondence had been brief due to the urgency of her situation, focusing more on character and compatibility than practical details. Though I realize I don't know much about your ranch. Adam helped her into the wagon before climbing up beside her. It's modest compared to what you might be used to in Boston, but it's growing. I have 160 acres with water rights, a small herd of cattle, some horses, and a decent house. As they left town, Grace felt the weight of the past 24 hours settling on her. She had arrived a fugitive, become a wife, been publicly accused, and then exonerated all before her first sunset in California. I'm sorry for bringing such chaos into your life, she said as they traveled through the Golden Hills dotted with oak trees. This isn't how I imagined our beginning. Adam's hands were steady on the reins. Life rarely follows our plans. My father used to say God laughs when men make plans. Your father sounds wise. He was. A shadow crossed Adam's face. He and my mother died of influenza 5 years ago. That's when I came west to start over. I'm so sorry, Grace said softly. It was hard, Adam admitted. But they left me with enough to make this new start. The land was cheap then, and I've worked it ever since. He glanced at her. What about your family? Grace looked out at the rolling landscape. My father was a teacher. He and my mother died in a fire when I was 16. I had no siblings or close relatives, so I went into service. That's how I came to work for Mrs. Harrington. Adam nodded thoughtfully. So we're both orphans making our way. Yes, Grace agreed. Though I admit I didn't expect to become a rancher's wife. What did you expect? Adam asked curiously. Grace considered. I'm not sure. Safety, perhaps. A quiet life away from scandal. She smiled wryly. So much for that plan. Adam laughed, a warm sound that made Grace feel inexplicably lighter. Well, Mrs. Blackburn, I can promise you'll never be bored. Ranch life has its challenges, but there's a certain freedom in it too. As they crested a hill, Adam pointed ahead. There it is, Blackburn Ranch. Grace followed his gesture and saw a neat homestead nestled in a valley where two streams converged. A sturdy two-story house painted white with green trim stood alongside a large barn and several outbuildings. Fenced pastures stretched in multiple directions, and a small orchard was visible behind the house. Cattle grazed in the distance, and horses moved about in a corral near the barn. It's lovely, she said sincerely, impressed by the order and prosperity evident even from a distance. Adam looked pleased. It's taken 5 years to get it this far, but it's finally starting to prosper. He guided the wagon down the hill. I should warn you, we won't be alone. Miguel Vasquez is my foreman. He and his wife Lucia live in a cabin near the barn. And I have 2 ranch hands, brothers named Tom and Jesse Parker, who bunk in the barn loft. Grace felt a flutter of nervousness. More new people to meet, and she would be expected to take on the role of the ranch mistress immediately. As if reading her thoughts, Adam added, Lucia has been keeping house for me. She's a fine cook and has been anxious for me to find a wife, mostly so she can stop worrying about me being too thin, I think. This made Grace smile. She sounds wonderful. She is. They all are. I've been fortunate in my workers. Adam's voice grew serious. I want you to know something, Grace. I didn't marry you just to save you from that bounty hunter, though I'm glad I could help. I married you because your letters showed me a woman of intelligence and character, someone I could build a life with. Even knowing so little about me, Grace asked. I know the important things, Adam replied. The rest we'll learn day by day. He hesitated. I don't expect. That is, I know this isn't a love match, but I hope we can be partners and friends and perhaps in time. He trailed off, and Grace felt a rush of gratitude for his sensitivity. I would like that very much, she said softly. Their conversation was interrupted as they reached the ranch yard. A stocky Mexican man of about 40 emerged from the barn, followed by a younger man with sandy hair. Boss, you're back earlier than we expected, the Mexican man called out. This must be Miguel, Grace thought. Had a good reason to hurry, Adam replied as he brought the wagon to a halt. He jumped down and came around to help Grace descend. Miguel, Tom, meet my wife, Grace Blackburn. Both men's eyes widened in surprise, and Grace couldn't help but smile at their expressions. Your wife, Miguel repeated, but you only left yesterday morning. Sometimes life moves quickly, Adam said, his hand resting lightly on Grace's back. Grace arrived on yesterday's stage from Boston. The mail-order bride, Tom said with sudden understanding, but we thought that wasn't happening for another month. Plans changed, Adam said simply. Where's Lucia? I want her to meet Grace. As if summoned by her name, a plump, dark-haired woman in her 30s hurried from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Her warm brown eyes widened at the sight of Grace. Dios mío, you have brought home a wife, she exclaimed, hurrying forward. Lucia Vasquez, this is Grace. Adam introduced them. To Grace's surprise, Lucia enveloped her in a warm hug. Bienvenida, welcome to Blackburn Ranch. We have waited so long for the señor to find a good woman. Grace returned the hug, touched by the woman's immediate warmth. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here. You must be tired from your journey, Lucia continued, taking Grace's arm. Come, I will show you the house while these men unload your things. As Lucia led her toward the house, chattering about meals and linens, Grace glanced back at Adam. He was watching her with an expression that made her heart skip, a mixture of pride and something softer, more vulnerable. He gave her a small nod of encouragement before turning to help Miguel with her trunk. The house was larger than it had appeared from a distance, with a spacious kitchen and dining area downstairs, along with a comfortable sitting room and Adam's small office. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms and a small sewing room. The master bedroom, Lucia said, opening a door to reveal a large room with a 4-poster bed, a wardrobe, a chest of drawers, and a washstand. A colorful quilt covered the bed, and crisp white curtains framed windows that looked out over the valley. "It's beautiful," Grace said sincerely. "I put fresh sheets this morning," Lucia said, a twinkle in her eye. "I had a feeling something was happening when the boss rode out so early yesterday looking so nervous." Grace blushed. "It all happened very quickly." Lucia patted her hand. "Sometimes that is best." "No time to worry, only to feel." She paused. "He is a good man, Senor Adam, the best I know. Patient, fair, works alongside his men instead of just giving orders." "I'm beginning to see that," Grace admitted. "Good." Lucia nodded decisively. "Now, I have a stew for dinner tonight to welcome you. Tomorrow, you can tell me how you like your kitchen arranged." After showing Grace where everything was kept, Lucia departed to finish dinner preparations, leaving Grace alone in her new bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of her situation. 24 hours ago, she had been a frightened young woman fleeing her past. Now she was Mrs. Grace Blackburn, mistress of a prosperous California ranch, married to a man who was still largely a stranger, a handsome, kind stranger who had risked his reputation to protect her, but a stranger nonetheless. A knock at the bedroom door interrupted her thoughts. "Grace," Adam called. "May I come in?" "Yes, of course," she replied, standing quickly. Adam entered with her trunk. "Where would you like this?" "By the wardrobe is fine," she directed. He set it down carefully, then straightened, looking slightly awkward in his own bedroom. "Lucia showed you around." "Yes, she's wonderful. The house is lovely, Adam. You've built something remarkable here." His expression warmed at her praise. "Thank you, it's been a labor of love." An awkward silence fell between them. There were so many things unsaid, so many questions about how they would navigate this sudden marriage. "Adam," Grace began hesitantly. "About tonight, I'll sleep in the spare room," he said quickly. Until you're comfortable with other arrangements." Relief and something like disappointment mingled in Grace's chest. "Thank you, that's very considerate." "I meant what I said earlier, Grace. I don't expect anything you're not ready to give." He took a step closer. "We may have rushed into marriage due to circumstances, but I want to do right by you. We can take time to know each other properly." Grace felt a rush of gratitude for this man who continued to surprise her with his thoughtfulness. "I appreciate that. Though I fear the gossips will have much to say about us." Adam chuckled. "Let them talk, we know the truth." His expression grew more serious. "Speaking of truth, is there anything else I should know about your past? Not that I don't believe you, but I'd rather not be surprised again." Grace shook her head. "No more fugitive accusations, I promise. My life before was quite ordinary until Walter's false accusation." "Good," Adam smiled. "Then we can focus on the future." He moved toward the door. "I'll let you get settled. Dinner is in an hour." After he left, Grace opened her trunk and began unpacking her modest belongings. Among her clothes and few personal items was a small framed daguerreotype of her parents, which she placed carefully on the bedside table. As she arranged her things in this strange new room that was to be her home, she found herself wondering what her parents would think of her whirlwind marriage. They would like Adam, she decided. Her father would appreciate his straightforward honesty, and her mother would approve of his kindness. The thought brought a measure of peace. By the time Grace descended to dinner, she had changed into a fresh dress and pinned her hair neatly. The dining table was set with surprisingly fine china, and delicious aromas filled the house. Lucia had prepared a feast beef stew with vegetables from the kitchen garden, fresh bread, and an apple pie for dessert. Miguel and Lucia joined them for the meal, as did Tom Parker and his younger brother Jesse, a quiet young man with the same sandy hair as his brother. The conversation flowed easily as the men told stories about the ranch and asked polite questions about Grace's journey west. "Did you always know you wanted to be a rancher?" Grace asked Adam during a lull in the conversation. "Not at all," he replied. "My father was a lawyer in Philadelphia. I was studying to follow in his footsteps when my parents died. After that," he shrugged. "The law lost its appeal. I needed open spaces and honest work with my hands. The boss built most of this house himself," Tom added proudly. "With plenty of help," Adam said modestly. "He is too humble," Miguel told Grace. When I met him, he had only a small cabin and 10 cows. Now look at all this." He gestured expansively. "It's impressive," Grace agreed, watching Adam's face as the others praised him. He accepted their words with gracious embarrassment, clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention. After dinner, Miguel and Lucia retired to their cabin, and the Parker brothers headed to the barn, leaving Adam and Grace alone for the first time since their arrival. "Would you like to see the rest of the ranch?" Adam offered. "There's still an hour of daylight left." Grace eagerly accepted, and soon they were walking side by side through the property. Adam showed her the orchard with its apple, pear, and cherry trees, the vegetable garden that Lucia tended, and the spring house where milk and butter were kept cool. They visited the chicken coop, where 24 hens provided eggs, and the smokehouse where meat was preserved. "You're completely self-sufficient," Grace observed, impressed. "As much as possible," Adam agreed, "though we still rely on town for flour, sugar, coffee, and other staples." They walked to a rise overlooking the pastures, where the cattle grazed peacefully in the golden evening light. In the distance, the Coast Range Mountains were turning purple with the setting sun. "It's beautiful," Grace said softly. "This is my favorite spot on the ranch," Adam admitted. "Sometimes I come up here just to think or to watch the sunset." "I can see why." Grace breathed deeply, taking in the scent of grass and earth. "There's a peacefulness here." Adam looked at her, his expression thoughtful. "You know, when I sent for a mail-order bride, I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew I needed a wife to help with the ranch, someone practical and hardworking. But I never imagined—" "What?" Grace asked when he hesitated. "I never imagined I'd feel so immediately certain that I'd made the right choice," he finished. Despite all the complications, Grace felt a blush rise to her cheeks, "even though I arrived with a bounty hunter on my heels." "Especially because of that," Adam said with a smile. "It showed me your character right away, your courage in facing your accuser, your honesty in telling me the truth." "You're very generous in your assessment," Grace murmured. "Not generous, just observant." Adam turned to face the setting sun again. "My mother used to say that difficult beginnings often lead to the strongest foundations. She sounds wise, like your father. They were good people. I wish you could have known them." He glanced at her. "What about your parents? What were they like?" As the sun slowly sank below the horizon, Grace told Adam about her childhood in a small Massachusetts town, her father's dedication to his students, her mother's beautiful singing voice and talent for creating something from nothing during hard times. "They taught me to find joy in simple things," she concluded. "Books, music, a well-tended garden. They weren't wealthy, but our home was rich in love." "That's a fine inheritance," Adam said softly. As darkness fell, they walked back to the house together, their steps falling naturally in sync. Lanterns had been lit in the windows, guiding them home. Inside, Grace found that Lucia had laid a fire in the sitting room hearth against the evening chill. "Would you like some tea before bed?" Adam offered. "That would be lovely." While Adam prepared the tea, Grace explored the sitting room, noting the well-stocked bookshelf with appreciation. Titles on agriculture and animal husbandry sat alongside Shakespeare, Dickens, and several volumes of poetry. "You're a reader," she observed when Adam returned with 2 cups of tea. "When time allows," he acknowledged, handing her a cup. "Winter evenings especially. The days are shorter, and once the animals are tended, there's little else to do." They sat in comfortable chairs by the fire, sipping their tea and discussing books they had both read. To Grace's delight, Adam was well-versed in literature and had thoughtful opinions on the works they discussed. "You surprise me, Mr. Blackburn," she said with a smile. "A rancher with the soul of a scholar." "We contain multitudes, as Mr. Whitman would say," Adam replied, returning her smile. "And what about you, Mrs. Blackburn? What unexpected facets are you hiding?" "Nothing so impressive, I'm afraid. I play the piano, or I did when I had access to one, and I'm rather good at chess." Adam's eyes lit up. "Really, I have a chess set. My father taught me to play when I was young." "My father taught me as well," Grace said, feeling another connection forming between them. "Perhaps we could play sometime." "I'd like that very much." By the time they finished their tea, Grace was fighting to stifle her yawns. The exhaustion of travel and the emotional turmoil of the past 2 days were catching up with her. You should rest, Adam said, noticing her fatigue. It's been quite an extraordinary day. Several extraordinary days, Grace agreed, rising from her chair. Good night, Adam, and thank you again for everything. Good night, Grace, he replied softly. As she climbed the stairs to her bedroom, Grace realized that for the first time since fleeing Boston, she felt safe. Whether it was the distance from her troubles, Mrs. Harrington's intervention, or Adam's steady presence, she couldn't say. Perhaps it was all three. In the bedroom, she changed into her nightgown and slipped beneath the quilt. Through the wall, she could hear Adam moving about in the spare room, the soft thud of boots being removed, the creak of bed springs. It was strange to think of him there, this man who was her husband yet still mostly unknown to her. But as sleep claimed her, Grace's last thought was that perhaps he wouldn't remain unknown for long, and perhaps that was a prospect more exciting than frightening. The following days passed in a blur of new experiences as Grace settled into life at Blackburn Ranch. Each morning she woke to roosters crowing and the smell of coffee brewing downstairs. Lucia had insisted on continuing to cook breakfast for everyone until Grace was properly settled, an arrangement Grace gratefully accepted while she learned the rhythms of ranch life. Adam rose before dawn each day to work with the men, returning mid-morning for a hearty breakfast before heading out again until dinner. Grace spent her days learning the household routine from Lucia: how to manage the kitchen garden, care for the chickens, preserve foods for winter, and adapt city cooking techniques to a wood-burning stove. You learn quickly, Lucia praised on the fourth day, as Grace successfully made her first batch of biscuits without burning them. Some city women, they come to the ranch and cry for months. I'm determined not to be useless, Grace replied, though privately she had shed a few tears of frustration when she'd ruined an entire pot of beans the day before. Senor Adam, he does not expect perfection, Lucia assured her. Only effort. That much was true. Each evening when Adam returned from working the ranch, he asked about her day with genuine interest, laughing at her mishaps and celebrating her small triumphs. Their evenings fell into a pleasant routine dinner, sometimes with the others and sometimes just the two of them, followed by conversation or reading by the fire. Twice they played chess, with each winning one game. On the fifth evening, Adam arrived home with a special surprise. I have something for you, he said after dinner, looking boyishly excited. Come with me. He led her to a small room off the sitting room that she had assumed was used for storage. Opening the door, he stepped back to let her enter first. Grace gasped when she saw what waited inside. A piano not new or grand, but solid and well-made, stood against the wall. Its wood was polished to a warm glow, and atop it sat several sheets of music. Adam, Grace breathed. When did you? I arranged it when I was in town the day you arrived, he explained. Reverend Miller's wife had mentioned they were replacing the church piano. I asked if they might sell the old one to me instead of shipping it back east. They delivered it yesterday while you were helping Lucia with the preserves. Grace ran her fingers reverently over the keys, producing a sweet chord. The instrument was well tuned and had a lovely tone. It's wonderful, but it must have been expensive. Consider it a wedding present, Adam said, watching her pleasure with evident satisfaction. Besides, the ranch has had a good year. We can afford a few luxuries. Impulsively, Grace reached up and kissed his cheek. Thank you. It's the most thoughtful gift I've ever received. Adam's eyes darkened slightly at her touch, and for a moment something electric passed between them. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. Will you play something for me? Grace sat at the piano, her fingers finding the keys naturally despite months without practice. She began with a simple folk melody, then moved into a Chopin nocturne from memory. The music filled the small room, transforming it into something magical. When she finished, Adam was watching her with an expression that made her heart race. That was beautiful, he said quietly. Music has always been my solace, Grace admitted. When my parents died, it was the only thing that brought me comfort for a long time. Adam moved to sit beside her on the piano bench. Play something else. For the next hour, Grace played while Adam listened, sometimes requesting songs he recognized, other times simply enjoying whatever she chose. By the time she finally stopped, her fingers aching pleasantly from the exercise. Something had shifted between them, a new intimacy born of shared appreciation. "Thank you for bringing music back into my life," Grace said as they prepared to retire for the night. "Thank you for bringing it into mine," Adam replied. "This house has needed a woman's touch for a long time." That night, as Grace lay in bed listening to the crickets outside her window, she realized how quickly she was coming to care for her new husband. His kindness, intelligence, and quiet strength appealed to her in ways she hadn't expected. Yet still they slept in separate rooms, their marriage unconsummated as Adam kept his promise to give her time. She wondered how long he would wait for her to make the first move, and whether she had the courage to do so. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. The next morning brought an unexpected challenge. Grace was gathering eggs from the henhouse when she heard a commotion in the yard. Hurrying outside, basket in hand, she saw a dusty rider dismounting from an exhausted horse. Miguel and Adam were already approaching him. "Telegram from town," the rider announced, handing Adam a folded paper. "Sheriff said it was urgent." Adam read the message, his expression darkening. He thanked the rider and offered him water and rest before his return journey, then turned to Miguel. "Trouble with the Henderson brothers. They've cut our fence line in 3 places and driven some of our cattle onto their property." "Those thieves," Miguel spat. "We should ride out immediately." "Agreed. Gather Tom and Jesse. We'll need all hands." Adam noticed Grace standing nearby and walked over to her. "I'm sorry, but I need to handle this. The Hendersons have been trying to force smaller ranchers out for years. If we don't respond quickly, they'll take it as weakness." "I understand," Grace said, though anxiety flickered through her at the grim determination in Adam's face. "Will it be dangerous?" "Not if they're smart," Adam replied. "We're just going to retrieve our cattle and repair our fences, but the Hendersons have a reputation for troublemaking." "Be careful," Grace urged, suddenly afraid for him. Adam touched her cheek briefly. "Always. We should be back by nightfall, if not." He hesitated. "If we're not back by morning, send word to Sheriff Davis." Before Grace could respond, he was striding away, calling out instructions to the men. Within 15 minutes, all 4 men had ridden out, leaving Grace and Lucia alone at the ranch. "Will they be all right?" Grace asked worriedly. Lucia crossed herself. "The Hendersons, they are bad men, but Senor Adam is smart. He will avoid fighting if possible." She patted Grace's arm. "Come, we will keep busy. Worry helps nothing." They spent the day working harder than usual, as if physical activity could keep concern at bay. Grace learned to make tortillas under Lucia's expert guidance, then helped clean the house thoroughly. By late afternoon, they had prepared a hearty stew that could be kept warm for the men's return. But as the sun began to set with no sign of the riders, Grace's anxiety mounted. She found herself checking the road repeatedly, straining to hear hoofbeats that didn't come. "Perhaps we should prepare for the possibility that they'll be staying out overnight," Lucia suggested gently as darkness fell. "Sometimes these matters take time to resolve." Grace nodded, trying to appear calm. "You're right. Let's make sure everything is ready for morning." They had just finished their own simple dinner when the sound of horses approaching sent both women rushing to the door. Relief flooded Grace when she saw 4 riders coming into the yard, all apparently unharmed. But as they drew closer, she gasped. Adam's shirt was torn and bloodied, and a dark bruise was forming on his cheekbone. "Adam," she cried, hurrying down the porch steps as he dismounted stiffly. "It's not as bad as it looks," he assured her, though he winced as she reached for his arm. "Just a few bruises." "What happened?" Grace demanded, helping him toward the house while Lucia went to check on her husband. "The Hendersons decided to argue with their fists instead of words," Adam explained grimly. "But we got our cattle back and repaired the fences. And Sheriff Davis is finally going to file charges against them for the cattle theft." Inside, Grace insisted on tending to Adam's injuries herself. She led him to the kitchen, where she could boil water and prepare clean cloths. As she gently cleaned a cut on his forehead, she asked, "Why would they risk stealing your cattle so openly?" "Surely they knew you would notice," Adam sighed. "Land and water. The drought last year hit them hard, and our creek-fed pastures are looking mighty appealing. They've been trying to drive out smaller ranchers for years, buying up land when people can't hold on anymore." But your ranch is prospering, Grace pointed out, which makes us even more of a target, Adam replied. We have some of the best water rights in the county. Grace dabbed witch hazel on his bruised cheek. Will they retaliate for today? They might. That's why we'll be doubling the watches for a while. Adam captured her hand as she worked. I'm sorry to bring this trouble home to you so soon. Don't apologize, Grace said firmly. This is my home now too, and I'll help defend it however I can. Adam's eyes warmed at her words. You're quite a woman, Grace Blackburn. Later that night, after the men had eaten and everyone had retired, Grace found herself unable to sleep. The day's events had left her shaken, not just by the potential danger to Adam, but by her own fierce reaction to it. The thought of harm coming to him had awakened feelings she hadn't fully acknowledged. Slipping from her bed, she put on her robe and went downstairs, thinking a cup of tea might help her sleep. To her surprise, she found Adam sitting at the kitchen table, similarly unable to rest. Are your injuries keeping you awake? She asked, concerned. No, just thinking, he replied, watching as she lit the stove to heat water. I'm sorry if I worried you today. You did, Grace admitted, measuring tea leaves into the pot, but I understand why you had to go. They fell silent as she prepared the tea and brought 2 cups to the table, sliding onto the bench opposite him. In the dim lantern light, Adam's bruised face looked more dramatic, highlighting the strong lines of his jaw and cheekbones. Grace, he began hesitantly, I want you to know that if you ever feel unsafe here, if ranch life proves too difficult or dangerous, I'm not leaving, she interrupted firmly. I've spent too much of my life without a true home to abandon this one at the first sign of trouble. Relief washed over Adam's face. I'm glad to hear that, but I would understand if you had second thoughts. This isn't the life I imagine you dreamed of when you were a girl, Grace smiled softly. After my parents died, I stopped dreaming of any particular life. I was too focused on survival. She sipped her tea thoughtfully. But if I had dreamed, I might have wished for exactly this, a place where I belong, work that matters, people who care for me. And a husband, Adam asked quietly. Would you have dreamed of someone like me? The question hung in the air between them, laden with meaning. Grace looked into his eyes, seeing vulnerability there despite his strength. I wouldn't have dared dream so high, she answered honestly. Adam's breath caught. Slowly, he reached across the table and took her hand in his. Grace, I know we agreed to take time to know each other, and I've tried to be patient. But today, when I was facing down the Hendersons, all I could think about was getting home to you. Not the ranch, not the cattle you. Grace's heart pounded in her chest. Adam. I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. I know it's fast, perhaps foolish given how little time we've known each other, but it's the truth, and after today, I didn't want to leave it unsaid. Grace swallowed hard, emotions swirling within her. I've been feeling things I didn't expect to feel, she confessed. When you rode out today, I was so afraid, not just of being left alone, but of losing you specifically. She squeezed his hand. I think I'm falling in love with you too. The words, once spoken, seemed to release something between them. Adam stood, drawing her to her feet and around the table to stand before him. His hands came up to frame her face gently. May I kiss you, he whispered. Properly this time, not like our wedding day. Grace nodded, her eyes never leaving his. Adam lowered his head slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. But she didn't want to pull away, she wanted this closeness, this connection. Their lips met in a kiss that started gently, but quickly deepened, as years of loneliness and weeks of growing attraction culminated in this moment. Grace's arms slid around Adam's neck as his encircled her waist, drawing her closer. The kiss seemed to go on forever, and when they finally parted, both were breathless. Stay with me tonight, Adam murmured against her hair. Be my wife in truth as well as name. Yes, Grace whispered, her heart too full for more words. Hand in hand, they climbed the stairs to the bedroom that would now truly be theirs together. As they crossed the threshold, Adam turned to her once more. I want you to know that I'll never let anyone hurt you again, he promised. Whatever comes, drought or cattle thieves or ghosts from the past, we'll face it together. Together, Grace agreed, sealing the promise with another kiss. That night, they became husband and wife in every sense, their bodies expressing what their hearts had already discovered. And afterward, As they lay together in the quiet darkness, Grace marveled at how completely her life had transformed in just over a week. From a frightened fugitive to a beloved wife, it seemed impossible, yet here she was. "What are you thinking?" Adam asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I never expected to find this kind of happiness," she answered truthfully. "It seems almost too perfect, like a dream I might wake from." Adam's arms tightened around her. "Not a dream. And maybe not perfect, there will be hard days ahead, I won't pretend otherwise, but we'll have good days too, many of them, and we'll have each other." Grace rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "That's all I need." As summer turned to autumn, life at Blackburn Ranch settled into a pleasant rhythm. True to Adam's prediction, there were difficult days. A calf was born breech and didn't survive despite their best efforts. The Hendersons continued their harassment until Sheriff Davis finally arrested the eldest brother for cattle theft. An early frost threatened the last of the garden harvest. But the good days far outnumbered the bad. Grace grew more confident in her role as a rancher's wife, mastering the skills Lucia taught her and adding her own touches to the household. The piano became a regular source of joy, with Grace often playing in the evenings while Adam and sometimes the ranch hands listened. She even began teaching Miguel and Lucia's young daughter, Rosa, who showed an aptitude for music. Adam and Grace's relationship deepened with each passing day. What had begun as mutual respect and attraction blossomed into a love that surprised them both with its intensity. They worked side by side during the day, Grace even learning to ride and help with some of the easier ranch tasks, and shared their nights in the warmth of their bed, learning each other's bodies as thoroughly as they were learning each other's minds and hearts. By October, Grace had news that would change their lives yet again. They were sitting on the porch after dinner, enjoying the crisp evening air and watching the sunset paint the hills gold and crimson. Adam had his arm around her shoulders, and Grace leaned comfortably against him, gathering her courage. "Adam," she began, "I have something to tell you." He looked down at her, his expression curious. "What is it?" "I'm going to have a baby," she said, her voice a mixture of nervousness and joy. "In the spring, probably April or May." Adam went completely still for a moment, then broke into the widest smile Grace had ever seen on his face. "A baby," he repeated, as if testing the word. "We're going to have a baby," Grace nodded, tears of happiness springing to her eyes at his reaction. "Are you pleased?" In answer, Adam lifted her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "Pleased? Grace, I'm ecstatic." He set her down carefully, suddenly concerned. "Should I not have done that? I don't want to hurt you or the baby." Grace laughed, touched by his immediate protectiveness. "We're fine. The doctor in town says I'm healthy and everything appears normal." "You've already seen Dr. Morgan?" Adam asked, surprised. "Last week when I went to town with Lucia, I wanted to be certain before I told you." Grace bit her lip. "I know we haven't talked much about children, because I didn't want to pressure you so soon," Adam assured her, "but I've always wanted a family, Grace, a big one if you're willing." "I'd like that," Grace admitted. "I was lonely as an only child." Adam pulled her close again, his hand resting reverently on her still flat stomach. "Our child will never be lonely. He or she will have us, and hopefully brothers and sisters one day. And Lucia and Miguel and the Parkers," Grace added, thinking of how these people had become like family to her. "A whole ranch full of people who will love him," Adam agreed. That night, as they lay together in their bed, Adam asked a question that had clearly been on his mind. "Have you thought about names yet?" Grace smiled in the darkness. "A few. If it's a boy, I thought perhaps James, after my father. Or Daniel, after yours. What about both? James Daniel has a nice sound to it." Adam's hand caressed her stomach gently. "And if it's a girl, Elizabeth maybe, or Sarah after my mother." "Sarah Elizabeth Blackburn," Adam tested the name. "It's beautiful." Grace turned in his arms to face him. "You're really happy about this, aren't you?" "Happier than I've ever been," he confirmed. "When I sent for a mail-order bride, I hoped for a companion, someone to share the work and maybe, eventually, build a family with. I never expected to find a woman I would love so completely, so quickly." He kissed her softly. "You've given me more than I dared to hope for, Grace." "As have you," she whispered. When I fled Boston, I was desperate and afraid. I thought the best I could hope for was safety and respectability. Instead, I found love and a true home. The weeks that followed were filled with preparations and planning. Adam insisted on expanding the house, adding another bedroom for the baby and improving the kitchen to make Grace's work easier. Miguel and the Parker brothers threw themselves into the construction, determined to have everything ready well before the baby arrived. Lucia took Grace under her wing even more thoroughly, teaching her everything she knew about pregnancy, childbirth, and caring for infants. "I had 5 babies," she told Grace, "each one different but all beautiful miracles." News of Grace's pregnancy spread quickly through the small community of Ukiah. To her surprise, several women from town, including the pastor's wife and the doctor's wife, called at the ranch to offer congratulations and advice. What began as polite visits soon developed into genuine friendships, especially with Sarah Miller, the pastor's young wife, who was also expecting her first child. "It's nice to have someone going through this at the same time," Sarah confided during one of her visits. "All these experienced mothers with their well-meaning advice can be overwhelming." Grace agreed, grateful to have found a friend who understood her mix of excitement and trepidation about becoming a mother. As winter settled over the valley, the ranch prepared for the season. The last of the harvest was preserved, firewood was stacked high beside every building, and the animals were brought closer to the barn for easier care during the cold months. Inside the house, Grace and Lucia carded wool for spinning, made candles, and sewed baby clothes from soft flannel. Christmas approached, bringing with it a festive atmosphere despite the snowfall that had isolated the ranch somewhat from town. Grace decorated the house with pine boughs and red ribbons, filling the rooms with the scent of evergreen. She baked special cookies from her mother's recipe and helped Lucia prepare traditional Mexican Christmas dishes. On Christmas Eve, everyone gathered in the main house for a celebration. The Parker brothers brought their fiddles, and Miguel produced a guitar. Music and laughter filled the rooms as they shared a feast and exchanged simple gifts. Adam had carved wooden toys for Miguel and Lucia's children, while Grace had knitted scarves for everyone. When the others had gone to attend midnight services at the church in town, Adam presented Grace with his gift, a beautiful cradle he had made himself from oak, polished to a warm glow and decorated with delicately carved leaves and flowers. "Adam, it's exquisite," Grace breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "I've never seen such fine workmanship." "My grandfather was a furniture maker in Philadelphia," Adam explained. "He taught me a few things when I was young. I've been working on this in the barn whenever I could find a spare hour." Grace retrieved her gift for him, a leather-bound journal with his initials stamped in gold on the cover. "For your thoughts, your ranch records, or letters to our child for when they're older," she suggested. "However you wish to use it." Adam accepted it reverently. "It's perfect, Grace. Thank you." He kissed her tenderly, then placed a hand on her growing belly, and "Thank you for this greatest gift of all." As they sat together before the fire that night, wrapped in a shared blanket and watching the flames dance, Grace reflected on how completely her life had changed in just 6 months. From a desperate young woman with a false accusation hanging over her head to a beloved wife and soon-to-be mother, secure in a home filled with love, it seemed like a miracle. "What are you thinking about?" Adam asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "How lucky I am," Grace replied simply. "And how grateful." Adam smiled, pulling her closer. "I'm the lucky one. You know, when that bounty hunter accused you in the street that day, I acted on instinct, offering my protection, but somehow I knew even then that you were someone special." "You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself," Grace mused. "You believed in me when you had every reason to doubt." "And I was right," Adam said proudly. "Look at all you've accomplished since then. You've learned to run a ranch household, made friends in town, won over even crusty old Tom Parker." "He's not crusty," Grace protested with a laugh. "Just shy. My point is, you've carved out a place for yourself here through your own strength and determination." "That's not luck, that's who you are." Grace rested her head on his shoulder, content in a way she had never imagined possible. We've both been given a second chance at happiness. I intend to make the most of every day of it. As do I, Adam promised, sealing his words with a kiss. The new year brought heavy snow that blanketed the valley in white, limiting travel and turning the ranch into a peaceful, isolated world of its own. Adam and his men kept busy maintaining the buildings, caring for the livestock and planning for spring planting, while Grace's days were filled with household tasks and preparations for the baby. By March, her belly was full and round, the baby's movements strong and frequent. Doctor. Morgan made the difficult journey to the ranch twice to check on her progress, pronouncing her healthy and the baby well-positioned. Another month, perhaps a bit more, he estimated during his last visit. Everything looks excellent, Mrs. Blackburn. As her due date approached, Grace found herself both eager and apprehensive. The cradle stood ready in their bedroom, filled with tiny clothes and soft blankets. Lucia had promised to be there for the birth, having assisted with many deliveries before, and arrangements had been made to send for Doctor. Morgan, when the time came, were you afraid before your first baby was born? Grace asked Lucia one afternoon as they folded the last of the baby clothes. She, of course, Lucia answered honestly. Every mother is afraid, but the fear passes when you hold your child for the first time. She patted Grace's hand. You will be a wonderful mother. I have watched you these months. You have a gentle heart but strong spirit. These are good things for a mother to have. Grace smiled gratefully. Thank you for all your help, Lucia. I don't know what I would have done without you. Ah, you would have managed, Lucia assured her. But it is better to have friends, no. A baby needs many people to love it. On an early April morning, just as dawn was breaking, Grace woke to a cramping pain that wrapped around her lower back. She lay still, waiting to see if it would return, and a few minutes later it did. Gently she shook Adam awake. Adam, she whispered, I think the baby is coming. He was instantly alert, sitting up and lighting the lamp beside their bed. Are you sure? How do you feel? The pains have just started, Grace reassured him. There's plenty of time, but someone should fetch Dr. Morgan and let Lucia know. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of pain, determination, and finally triumph. Doctor. Morgan arrived by mid-morning, and Lucia stayed by Grace's side throughout the ordeal, offering encouragement and practical help. Adam was banished to the hallway with the other men, where he wore a path in the floor with his pacing. Just as the sun was setting, casting golden light through the bedroom windows, Grace gave a final push and their child entered the world with a lusty cry. A boy, Dr. Morgan announced, quickly cleaning and wrapping the red-faced infant, a fine, healthy son. Grace collapsed against the pillows, exhausted but filled with indescribable joy as the doctor placed her son in her arms. The baby had a shock of dark hair like Adam's, and when he briefly opened his eyes, Grace thought she glimpsed her own green eyes looking back at her. He's perfect, she whispered, counting his fingers and toes with wonder. Shall I get your husband? Lucia asked, wiping happy tears from her eyes. At Grace's nod, Lucia went to the door and called for Adam. He entered cautiously, his face a mixture of worry and hope, but when he saw Grace holding their child, all concern melted into pure awe. Adam, meet your son, Grace said softly. James Daniel Blackburn. Adam approached the bed slowly, as if afraid to break the spell of the moment. Perching carefully beside Grace, he gazed down at the tiny face of his son, reaching out one finger to stroke the baby's cheek. Hello, James, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We've been waiting for you. The baby yawned and curled his tiny fingers around Adam's much larger one, and in that moment, Adam's face transformed with a love so profound that Grace felt tears spring to her eyes. Would you like to hold him? She offered. With reverent care, Adam took his son into his arms, cradling him as if he were made of the most delicate porcelain. He's so small, he marveled, and yet so perfect. Just like his father, Grace murmured, watching the two most important people in her world bond for the first time. Adam looked up at her, his eyes shining. Thank you, he said simply. For him, for everything. As Grace watched her husband hold their newborn son, she felt a sense of completion, of rightness that went beyond words. From the moment she had stepped off that stagecoach in Ukiah, frightened and alone, to this moment of pure joy surrounded by family, Her journey had been one of transformation and healing. The past no longer haunted her. The future stretched before them bright with promise. And the present, this perfect, precious present, was more than she had ever dared to dream. "I love you," she told Adam, reaching out to touch his face. "Both of you so very much, and we love you," Adam replied, leaning over to kiss her gently. "Always and forever." As twilight deepened into night, the little family remained together, marveling at the miracle they had created. Outside their window, stars appeared one by one in the clear California sky, bearing silent witness to the beginning of a new chapter in the story of Blackburn Ranch, a story of love, redemption, and the family that had found each other against all odds. 5 years passed in what seemed like the blink of an eye. Blackburn Ranch had prospered beyond Adam's wildest hopes, expanding to include another 100 acres of prime grazing land purchased from a neighbor who had decided to return east. The house had grown too, with a second addition built when Grace discovered she was expecting again, just 18 months after James was born. Sarah Elizabeth Blackburn had arrived in the autumn of 1874, a dainty girl with her mother's auburn curls and her father's bright blue eyes. Unlike her serious older brother, Sarah was all laughter and mischief from the start, keeping her parents on their toes with her adventurous spirit. Now, in the summer of 1877, Grace stood on the front porch watching her children play in the yard. James, at 5, was a thoughtful boy who loved books and animals with equal passion. He followed Adam everywhere on the ranch, soaking up knowledge about cattle and horses with an impressive focus for one so young. Sarah, 3.5, was currently attempting to climb the oak tree near the house, her pink dress hiked up to reveal ruffled pantaloons. "Sarah Elizabeth, be careful," Grace called, one hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. Their third child was due in just a month, and according to Dr. Morgan, this one might be twins. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. "I'm just going to the first branch, Mama," Sarah called back cheerfully, fearless as always. James looked up from the stick house he was building and frowned at his sister. "Papa said you're not supposed to climb trees without him watching," he reminded her seriously. "You're no fun, Jamie," Sarah pouted, but she obediently slid back down the trunk. Grace smiled at their interaction. For all their differences, the siblings were devoted to each other, with James taking his role as protective older brother very seriously. A movement at the edge of the property caught Grace's attention. A rider was approaching from the direction of town, and as he drew closer, she recognized Tom Parker. He had married the schoolteacher from Ukiah the previous year and now lived in town, though he still worked on the ranch several days a week. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Blackburn," Tom called as he rode into the yard. "Fine day, isn't it?" "It is indeed, Tom," Grace agreed. "Are you looking for Adam? He's in the north pasture with Miguel, checking on the new calves." "Actually, I came with news for both of you," Tom said, dismounting and removing his hat. "There was a telegram at the office addressed to you. Seemed important, so I offered to bring it out." He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a folded piece of paper. Grace took it with a word of thanks, curious about who might be sending them a telegram. Their circle of correspondence was small, a few friends in town, occasional letters from Mrs. Harrington in Boston, and Adam's elderly aunt in Philadelphia. Opening the telegram, she read, "Grace Blackburn stop arriving Ukiah July 23rd stop bringing legal documents of interest. Stop Eleanor Harrington. Is everything all right, madam?" Tom asked, noting her surprised expression. "Yes, thank you," Grace assured him. "It's from a friend in Boston who's coming to visit. Would you like some lemonade before you head back? Lucia made some fresh this morning." After sending Tom on his way with a glass of lemonade and a slice of apple cake, Grace sat on the porch swing, considering the telegram. Mrs. Harrington had visited once before, when Sarah was a baby, but this mention of legal documents of interest was puzzling. What could they be? And why would her former employer travel across the country to deliver them personally? When Adam returned for dinner that evening, Grace showed him the telegram. "July 23rd, that's next week," he noted, frowning slightly. "Do you have any idea what these documents might be?" Grace shook her head. "None at all. Last I heard from her, everything was well in Boston. Walter was still in Europe, apparently trying to make a new start after the scandal. Adam set the telegram aside. Well, we'll find out soon enough. In the meantime, we should prepare the guest room. A journey from Boston is still arduous, even with the Transcontinental Railroad making it faster than it was when you came. You don't mind her visiting? Grace asked, although Adam and Mrs. Harrington had gotten along well during her previous visit. Grace knew her former employer could be somewhat imperious. Adam smiled. Of course not. She's important to you, and she traveled a very long way to help clear your name 5 years ago. We owe her a proper welcome. He placed his hand on Grace's rounded belly. Besides, I'm sure she'll be delighted to meet the newest Blackburn or Blackburns, as the case may be. If they decide to arrive while she's here, Grace said with a laugh. Babies have their own schedules. The following days were filled with preparations for Mrs. Harrington's visit. Grace and Lucia cleaned the guest room thoroughly, putting fresh linens on the bed and arranging wildflowers on the dresser. The children were both excited about the visitor, though James remembered Mrs. Harrington from her previous visit, while Sarah knew her only from stories. Adam rode into town to check the stage coach schedule and confirm which day they should expect her arrival. According to the depot master, the stage from Sacramento would arrive around mid-afternoon on the 23rd, barring any delays. On the appointed day, Adam hitched the buggy to drive into town to meet Mrs. Harrington, bringing James along while Grace and Sarah remained at the ranch. Grace was finding it increasingly uncomfortable to travel as her pregnancy advanced, and she preferred to greet her former employer at home where she could rest if needed. The hours seemed to crawl by as Grace waited, keeping busy with small tasks and trying to contain Sarah's boundless energy. When she finally heard the buggy returning, she went to the porch, straightening her maternity dress and checking that her hair was still neatly pinned. The buggy came into view, with Adam driving and James sitting proudly beside him. In the back seat sat Mrs. Harrington, looking much as she had during her last visit, elegant and poised despite the dust of travel, her silver hair arranged beneath a fashionable hat. Grace, my dear, Mrs. Harrington called as Adam brought the buggy to a stop. How wonderful to see you again. Adam helped her down, and Grace moved forward to greet her with a warm embrace. Welcome to Blackburn Ranch, Mrs. Harrington. We're so pleased you've come. Eleanor, please, the older woman insisted. After all we've been through together, I think we can dispense with formality. She stepped back to look at Grace more fully. My goodness, you're positively blooming. When is the blessed event expected? Next month, though Dr. Morgan thinks it might be sooner, Grace replied, guiding her guest toward the house. And possibly twins, he says. How marvelous. Eleanor exclaimed, your family is growing beautifully. She turned to smile at Sarah, who was peeking shyly from behind Grace's skirts. And who is this lovely young lady? You must be Sarah. I've heard so much about you in your mother's letters. Sarah stepped forward with unusual reserve. How do you do, madam? She recited carefully, just as Grace had taught her. Eleanor chuckled. Very well indeed, now that I've met you. She glanced at James, who stood tall beside his father. And James, you've grown at least 6 inches since I saw you last. You're becoming quite the young rancher. James beamed at the recognition. Papa says I can help with the branding next spring if I practice with my rope. I'm sure you'll be excellent at it, Eleanor assured him. Once inside, Lucia had prepared a light meal to welcome their guest. After Eleanor had refreshed herself from her journey, they gathered around the dining table, with the children on their best behavior, even Sarah, who was normally incapable of sitting still through an entire meal. It wasn't until after dinner, when the children had been put to bed, and the adults retired to the sitting room with cups of tea, that Eleanor brought up the purpose of her visit. I imagine you've been curious about why I've come all this way, she said, setting down her teacup. And what these legal documents might be. We have wondered, Adam admitted, though your company alone is reason enough for a visit. Eleanor smiled at him appreciatively. You're kind to say so, but I do have a specific purpose. She reached for the small valise she had kept with her and withdrew a thick envelope. These papers represent the culmination of nearly 5 years of legal proceedings. Legal proceedings, Grace echoed, confused. Against Walter, Eleanor clarified. After his disgrace in the diamond necklace affair, more women came forward with similar stories of his misconduct and attempts at blackmail. It seems he had made quite a habit of it, Grace gasped. How awful, indeed. As these cases were investigated, the authorities also uncovered financial improprieties. Walter had been embezzling from the family business for years. Eleanor's expression hardened. He is currently serving a 10-year sentence in prison. I'm so sorry, Grace said sincerely. Despite what Walter had done to her, she knew how painful this must be for a mother. Don't be, Eleanor said firmly. He made his choices and now he faces the consequences, but that's not why I'm here. She handed the envelope to Grace. These documents represent restitution. The courts have awarded you damages. Grace, substantial damages for the harm Walter caused you. Grace opened the envelope with trembling fingers, Adam leaning close to read over her shoulder. Inside were legal papers declaring a judgment in favor of Grace Winters Blackburn in the amount of $5,000, along with a formal public apology from Walter Harrington for false accusations and damage to her reputation. $5,000. Adam breathed, clearly stunned by the amount. It's the least he owes her, Eleanor stated. I insisted on it, and the judge agreed. Walter's actions forced Grace to flee her home, her position, her entire life. Had circumstances been different, she might have faced imprisonment for a crime she didn't commit. This is overwhelming, Grace said, still trying to absorb the news. I never expected any compensation. I know you didn't, Eleanor said gently. That's partly why I wanted to deliver this personally. I wanted to see your face when you received it, to know that some measure of justice has finally been served. She paused. There's something else as well. From her valise, she produced a smaller box and handed it to Grace. Inside lay a beautiful diamond pendant on a gold chain, not the necklace that had been the cause of so much trouble, but a new piece, elegant in its simplicity. This is a gift from me, Eleanor explained. A symbol of our enduring friendship despite everything that happened. Tears filled Grace's eyes. It's beautiful, but I couldn't possibly. You can and you will, Eleanor interrupted firmly. I've thought of you as the daughter I never had since long before this unfortunate business. Please accept it with my love. Grace looked to Adam, who nodded his encouragement. Thank you, she said finally, closing her fingers around the pendant. For this, and for coming so far to bring closure to that chapter of my life. There's one more thing, Eleanor said. The money, it's already been transferred to the Bank of Ukiah. I took the liberty of arranging that before I left Boston. The bank manager has the necessary papers for you to access it whenever you wish. Adam whistled softly. That's a significant sum. It could make a real difference to the ranch, especially with another child or children on the way. Or 2 children's educations, Grace suggested, or perhaps some of each. Eleanor smiled approvingly. That's entirely up to you. It's your money to use as you see fit. Later that night, after Eleanor had retired to the guest room and the house was quiet, Grace and Adam sat together on their bed, still discussing the unexpected windfall. I never imagined I would see justice done, Grace admitted. After I fled Boston, I thought that chapter of my life was simply closed, for better or worse. Life has a way of coming full circle, Adam observed, his arm around her shoulders. Mrs. Harrington, Eleanor has been a remarkable champion for you. She has, Grace agreed. Though I think she also needed to make amends in her own way for not protecting me from Walter when I was in her household. Adam nodded thoughtfully. What would you like to do with the money? We don't have to decide right away, but it's good to consider our options. Grace leaned against him, considering. I think we should set aside a portion for James and Sarah's education and the new babies, of course. Perhaps we could also make some improvements to the ranch, that new irrigation system you've been researching. That would certainly increase our productivity, Adam agreed. Maybe we could also think about adding onto the house again. With potentially 5 of us soon, we might want more space. And a proper piano, Grace added. The one from the church has served well, but a better instrument would last for generations. They continued discussing possibilities until Grace yawned widely, prompting Adam to insist she get some rest. As they settled beneath the covers, Grace felt a profound sense of closure. The shadow that had followed her from Boston was truly gone now, replaced by a future brighter than she could have imagined. "Are you happy, Grace?" Adam asked softly in the darkness, his hand resting protectively over their unborn child. "Completely," she answered without hesitation. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible," he assured her, kissing her gently. "When you stepped off that stagecoach 5 years ago, I had no idea how completely you would change my life." "For the better, I hope," Grace murmured sleepily. "In every way," Adam confirmed, "every single way." As Grace drifted toward sleep in her husband's arms, surrounded by the home they had built together, she reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. A false accusation, a desperate journey, a chance meeting with a man who had looked into her eyes and promised her safety, all leading to a life filled with love, purpose, and joy. The mail-order bride with a secret past had found not just safety, but a true home. And the cowboy who had offered her protection had gained a partner who completed his life in ways he had never imagined. It was, Grace thought as sleep claimed her, a perfect circle beginning with uncertainty and fear, but ending with absolute certainty and love. Eleanor Harrington stayed at Blackburn Ranch for 2 weeks, becoming an honorary grandmother to James and Sarah, who adored her elegant manners and the stories she told of Boston society. She was particularly taken with Sarah's spirited nature, declaring that the little girl reminded her of herself as a child. "She'll lead the next generation, that one," Eleanor predicted as she watched Sarah organizing James and the ranch dogs into some elaborate game of her own invention. Mark my words. The visit might have continued longer, but on a warm August afternoon, just 3 days before Eleanor was scheduled to return east, Grace went into labor. Unlike her previous deliveries, this one progressed rapidly, so rapidly that there was barely time to send for doctor. Morgan from town. Adam, who had been preparing to ride out with the men to check on a broken fence, heard Grace's first cry and ran to the house instead. Finding her already in active labor, he sent Miguel racing to town for the doctor, while he and Lucia helped Grace to the bedroom. Eleanor took charge of the children, keeping them occupied in the far side of the house, while their mother brought new life into the world. To everyone's surprise, Grace delivered not the twins that had been predicted, but a single robust son nearly 9 pounds, with a healthy set of lungs that announced his arrival to the entire household. Dr. Morgan arrived just in time to check the baby and ensure Grace was recovering well. "Sometimes we make mistakes," he admitted cheerfully, examining the newborn. "But this young man is perfect, just large enough to make us think he had a companion." When the excitement had calmed and Grace rested comfortably with her new son cradled in her arms, Eleanor, James, and Sarah were invited to meet the newest member of the family. "Children, this is your brother," Adam announced proudly. "Daniel William Blackburn." James approached the bed cautiously, studying the red-faced infant with serious concentration. "He's very small," he observed, "but his hands are strong." Indeed, the baby had wrapped his tiny fingers tightly around his older brother's offered finger. Sarah was less reserved. "He's beautiful," she declared, clambering onto the bed for a closer look. "Can I hold him, Mama, please?" With careful guidance from Adam, Sarah was allowed to sit with the baby on her lap, her small face a picture of wonder and pride. "Look, I'm a big sister now," she announced importantly to Eleanor, who stood watching the scene with misty eyes. "And a very fine one you'll be," Eleanor assured her before turning to Grace. "He's magnificent, my dear. Congratulations to you both. Would you like to hold him?" Grace offered. As Eleanor cradled the newborn, murmuring soft words of welcome, Grace exchanged a glance with Adam. They had discussed adding Eleanor's name to the babies if it had been a girl, but with another son, they had chosen to honor Adam's father and Grace's brother who had died in childhood. "I'm honored to be here for this moment," Eleanor said, gently rocking Daniel. "It seems fitting, somehow a completion of our circle. You'll always be welcome in our home," Adam told her sincerely. "The children would be devastated if this were your only visit." Eleanor smiled. "I believe I could be persuaded to make the journey annually. California agrees with me, and seeing Grace so happy and surrounded by family is the best medicine for an old woman's heart." You're hardly old, Grace protested affectionately. Old enough to know what matters, Eleanor replied, returning the baby to Grace's arms. And this is what matters. Family, love, building something that will outlast us all. In the days that followed, as Grace recovered her strength and Daniel began to thrive, the household settled into a new rhythm that accommodated their expanded family. Eleanor postponed her return journey, insisting on staying until Grace was fully on her feet again. Besides, she added with a twinkle in her eye, I've become quite fond of California. I might even consider purchasing a small property in town for more extended visits. This suggestion delighted the children, who had become devoted to Grandma Eleanor, as they had taken to calling her. Even Adam seemed pleased at the prospect of having Eleanor as a more regular presence in their lives. On a golden September afternoon, with baby Daniel nearly a month old, the Blackburn family gathered on the porch to bid Eleanor farewell as she departed for her long journey back to Boston. The stagecoach would arrive shortly to take her to Ukiah, where she would stay overnight before continuing to Sacramento and the Transcontinental Railroad. You must write to me the moment you reach Boston safely, Grace insisted, hugging her former employer and dear friend. Of course, my dear, Eleanor promised, and you must send regular reports on this young man's progress. She bent to kiss Daniel's downy head as he slept in Grace's arms. James and Sarah clung to Eleanor's skirts, extracting promises for her quick return and more stories upon her next visit. Adam presented her with a carved wooden box containing various mementos of her stay, pressed flowers from the ranch, a small watercolor painting of the house that Grace had done, and a leather bookmark that James had helped make. So you won't forget us, he said with a smile. As if I could, Eleanor replied, visibly touched by the gift. She looked around at the family gathered on the porch, Adam with his arm around Grace, baby Daniel sleeping peacefully, James and Sarah watching her with adoring eyes. You have built something remarkable here, she told them. Something that will endure. The sound of approaching hooves announced the arrival of Tom Parker, who had volunteered to drive Eleanor to town in the ranch buggy. As her luggage was loaded and final farewells exchanged, Eleanor drew Grace aside for a moment. When you arrived in Boston all those years ago, a shy girl seeking employment, I never imagined the strength and courage you possessed, she said quietly. Watching you now, a confident woman, a loving mother, a true partner to your husband, I couldn't be prouder if you were my own daughter. Tears sprang to Grace's eyes. You've been more than an employer or a friend to me, she replied. You've been the mother I lost too soon. I can never thank you enough for all you've done. Live well and be happy, Eleanor said simply. That's all the thanks I need. With a final embrace, Eleanor climbed into the buggy. As Tom turned the horses toward the road to town, she waved until the vehicle disappeared around a bend in the road. Will she really come back? Sarah asked, slipping her small hand into Grace's free one. I believe she will, Grace assured her daughter. Some people come into our lives briefly, but others return again and again because they belong with us, even if they live far away. Like family, James stated with the certainty of a child who has always known security. Exactly like family, Adam agreed, gathering his wife and children close as they turned back toward the house, the home they had built together, filled with love and promise for the future. That evening, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Adam and Grace sat together on the porch swing, baby Daniel nestled in his mother's arms. The night was clear, stars scattered across the vast California sky like diamonds on black velvet. I've been thinking, Adam said, his arm around Grace's shoulders, about what Eleanor said, that we've built something that will endure. We have, Grace agreed. This ranch, our family, our life together. It all started with you, Adam said softly. With your courage in coming west and my luck in being at that stagecoach depot the day you arrived, Grace smiled at the memory. I was so afraid that day. Afraid of being caught, afraid of meeting you, afraid the future I hoped for was just a dream that would shatter at any moment. And then that bounty hunter showed up and nearly ruined everything, Adam recalled. But he didn't, Grace pointed out. Because you looked at me, a complete stranger with a mysterious past, and told me I was safe with you, and somehow I believed you. I meant it then and I mean it now, Adam said, drawing her closer. You will always be safe with me, Grace Blackburn, you and our children's children if I'm blessed with that many years. Grace leaned her head against her husband's shoulder, feeling the solid strength and unwavering love that had become the foundation of her life. I never dreamed I could be this happy, she whispered. Thank you for making me your wife. Thank you for saying yes, Adam replied, kissing her gently. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the night sky, a brief, brilliant moment of beauty that disappeared as quickly as it had come. But unlike that fleeting light, what Grace and Adam had built together would endure through seasons and years, challenges and joys, a legacy of love that had begun with a chance meeting and a promise of safety. And as they sat together in the quiet darkness, their sleeping baby between them and their future stretching before them like an open road, they knew that every step of their journey had led them exactly where they were meant to be home, in each other's arms, safe in a love that would last a lifetime and beyond.